Robert Schuller is standing by, ready to be on the show. If Robert can get a move on, we'll finally be ready to go. Come on, Mr. Twinkle Toes. Let's get this show on the road.
All right, let me see if I'm here. I think I'm here. Yeah, hey, everybody. Podcast Set is here. Wish I had Reverend Robert Schuller with me right in studio, but I don't. So second best, he's piping in the internet. And Reverend Robert Schuller, welcome to Robert Scott Bell Show.
Hey, Scott Bell, this is fun. You're a kick. And I loved your introduction. I felt like I could have written that myself because I've lived it and experienced it. And I just love your approach to health and wellness, because we don't have a health system in the United States of America. We have a managed sickness program in the United States of America. They want to keep you sick, and they're going to continue to give you the drugs for the rest of your life so that the numbers read right, but you don't actually heal your liver or any of your other organs. They just stay sick because they've got the drugs to take care of you.
Robert, has it ever occurred to you that we're living in like some kind of weird science fiction film, where they're trying to control everything by controlling the food, the water, as we're going to get into with you shortly, and disconnect us from the source of all creation, our divine rights, if you will, that I think were espoused in our Declaration of Independence, and, that we weren't going to be ruled by a bunch of kings, queens, emperors, globalists like they're attempting to do now.
Yes, but not really. Because if you take a look at the past few decades, what has taken place in the United States of America, it's inevitable that we would end up where we are. Why do I say that? You take the Bible, you take the prayer out of schools, you then take the Ten Commandments out of our judicial system, you take Christianity and swearing on the Bible out of our, and you can't expect to end up anywhere else. The result of this, I believe we have Anthony Joseph Magdala Fauci, and he's going to go down in history as probably one of the worst human beings that the world has ever seen. It is a disgrace that he was able to go on so long and do as much damage to health and wellness as he has. And so I'm encouraged. I'm actually thrilled that we have Robert F. Kennedy in there and making some changes, and he's putting his staff together to make a difference. And I believe that the process is taking place, and I have more confidence today in the governance of the United States of America than I've had in my entire life.
Yes, but we got to be cautious, not because, well, we would, I can't fail in our duty to defend liberty and freedom if we suddenly trust the government because good people or better people are in it. That was our message from our founders, to limit and restrict the power and scope of government so that we would maximize freedom. And I agree with you. We're dealing with a spiritual crisis that has led to this inevitably 100%. As well. And if
Ephesians
I'm not mistaken,
6:12.
Your father, Robert Schuller, had the Crystal Cathedral down there. Yeah. So you got a long history. I was going to ask you about, I talk about medicine as being a cult, modern medicine, that people of faith have often misplaced faith in a secular or the pharmakeia concept of sorcery, where they worship in church once or twice a week, and then the rest of the week they turn their bodies over to medical man, which are Marxist collectivists, as I pointed out in my monologue.
Well, I have a very interesting history of an approach to wellness and health. I go all the way back. I think one of the first clues I had that something was amiss was when I was in high school. I was in high school and I had cystic acne, and it was horrible, and it just persisted. And my dad's barber, I went to my dad's barber. He said, Robert, have you ever thought of not drinking milk? And I kind of looked at him and go, not drinking milk? What does that have to do with my cystic acne? Because I was going to a dermatologist every week. They would shoot all these huge boils with cortisone, and they would stick me under a sun lamp and burn me all over the place. And I would do that every single week, and I did that for over a year. And I said, no. And he says, well, just give it a try. I mean, what's the big deal? Well, I was drinking at least a gallon of milk every day. Yeah, I didn't drink water. I drank milk. And
now, were you, by the way, were you getting
and
it
it
from?
was just the stuff over the counter, homogenized, pasteurized,
Yeah.
the good stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And so I quit drinking it, and instantly my acne cleared up, and I never went back to the dermatologist again. It was a miracle. I'm afraid to drink milk to this day. I won't get close to it. So that was my first inkling that something's amiss here. Why didn't my dermatologist tell me to quit drinking milk? If he had, he would have lost a client earlier. As it was, he had another year of income.
Right.
So then my second inkling and understanding of our medical system came when I was struggling with high cholesterol in the early 80s. And at that point, if you want to listen to the news, every health section had to do with cholesterol. You have to look at your LDLs, your HDLs, and do the mathematical equation and find out whether or not you're going to die of a heart attack. And so you got to get those HDLs down and get those LDLs up and all of this stuff. And it was and so I was reading these books and studying it, and it didn't make any sense to me really, until all of a sudden they came out with the cure. We have Lipitor. We have the statin drugs, and it will reduce your cholesterol. So now you can live forever and never have to worry about your drugs and never have to worry about your cholesterol again, because we've saved you. Mm-hmm. I'm going, this is interesting.
Pharmaceutical
Here they had
saviors.
this whole campaign for a year that was on everywhere. Everyone was talking about cholesterol. And all of a sudden, a year later, they have a drug for it. I thought it took years to get drugs out for this stuff. It was all part of their marketing plan, right? The biggest problem they had was they didn't reach their goals, their distribution goals. So suddenly, healthy cholesterol went from 240 down to 200. And then they had all they reached. They exceeded their goals, and they were perfectly happy. And it hasn't changed. Now, what happened? Was it unhealthy to have 240, and then suddenly it isn't healthy to have 240? I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever unless you have a drug that's dependent upon lower numbers for distribution. And this is in the mid 80s. So then in the late 80s, my journey continued with understanding of health and wellness when my youngest son got an injection. I think it was his MMR, and
Sure.
his legs swelled up really bad. He started crying incessantly for 2 days. That then moved into asthma. He had chronic asthma and chronic ear infections. In fact, his pediatrician put him on prophylactic antibiotics to take care of his ear infections, and we had to take all of his stuffed animals out of his room. And we're going, this doesn't sound right. This just doesn't feel that he's on prophylactic antibiotics. And somebody said, why don't you consider just taking him to a chiropractor? I'm going, a quackopractor? What are you talking about? Chiropractic? And they said, yeah, well, just try it. You have nothing to lose. And we had tried everything, and we had everything to lose. This child's health was just going downhill and going downhill fast. And we were very concerned about it. So we took him to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor adjusted him, immediately started breathing better. And then he said, these ear infections, you just have to help me. I'll help you get through this. Allow the body to do what it does. It can take care of these ear infections. And so we weaned him off all of the antibiotics. He went through 2 or 3 ear infections, and then they just dissipated. And today he is the healthiest young man you could ever possibly imagine. And he's a chiropractor, and it completely changed his life.
How old is your son now?
So this is my son, Anthony. He is
Anthony.
a chiropractor, my youngest son. And so those things were a huge part in opening my eyes to how the health industry works. And
Yes.
So I get it. And I was uniquely qualified to get it when 2020 came around. Not too many pastors had their eyes open. Once your eyes are open and you see it, You can't go back. You can't close it. You can't justify it. You can't rationalize how people can do this. You look at others whose eyes are still closed, and you go, they don't know what they're missing. They're just living in the sickness when they could be healthy.
All right. Well, Reverend Robert Schuller, we're going to get to your book, God Always Wins, Divine Liberation from the Gods of the Woke. I love the title. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
And it's accurate. But also, my concern to the appeal of people of faith, of, all faiths, to realize how much they have abandoned their faith when they adopt fear as their view of the world, as we were taught by the medical media government complex during COVID, more overtly than any other time. I've been, broadcasting about this for 25 plus years and as a homeopath for 30. But the question is, how do we reach those people of faith, particularly to let them know that they're being deceived on the issue of drugs, vaccines, all of these things? And I don't mean to eliminate it all from the space completely, because there's a place for even that form of medicine. But by and large, it's predominantly dominated and to the eradication of all other forms of medicine, including they attempted to eliminate chiropractic in the 20th century.
Oh, totally, completely. So, no, I'm in my granddaughter's bedroom, and she's
like, Grandpa, what are you doing in my bedroom?
Yeah, so I'm visiting her in Florida.
If she wants to say hi, she can say hi. It's okay.
Come here and say hi
to your granddaughter and say hello to
everybody.
This is my
granddaughter.
Hello. Hi. Hello. What is your name?
By the way, she's unvaccinated.
Hooray.
And they moved from California. They fled California to there you go, sweetheart. They fled California to Florida so they could go to school. And in California, you cannot go to school with no exemptions are accepted.
Yeah.
You cannot go to school. That was introduced by Senator Pan, which is the most
Dickie Pan.
Ironic thing in the world when you consider it's from Pan, because it's the god Pan that was being worshipped in Caesarea Philippi.
That's right.
When Jesus went and asked his apostles, "You saying goodbye?" Okay. Goodbye.
Great to see you. Thanks for staying. Thanks to your parents for keeping you from being injected. That's great. And that's a great sign for you as a grandpa, Robert, that you've raised kids to see through this. I'm so pleased.
So Jesus is in Caesarea Philippi when he asks his apostles, "Who do you say that I am?" They say, "Some say you're a prophet. Some say you're a teacher." And he says, "But who do you say I am?" And it's Peter who jumps up right away and says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And the unique thing about him being there is that is where the god Pan was worshipped. The god Pan has goat horns. He has a goat beard. He has a human upper torso and a goat lower torso and goat feet. And this is the god Pan. They were worshiping him. The Pan is he plays the pan flute. That's why it's called the pan flute. And then he has this god is from this god's name we get the word panic, and pandemonium, pandemic, and so it's evil to the core of
fear.
Idolatry.
It's a fear-based god if there ever was one.
100%. And then it is the Senator
Pan,
California Pan, who comes. There's every single person with the passage of the Senate bill that in I think it was 2019 or 2018, which required absolutely no exemptions whatsoever, religious, philosophical, health-wise. So every single child, if they want to go to school in public school, has to be fully immunized with everything that the CDC has required. The good news is that the child's schedule now does no longer require the MMR vaccine for COVID, because you can't call it COVID-19 anymore. That's behind us. The one they're giving now is for COVID-24, right? And yet we still call it COVID-19. Why do you test for COVID-19? COVID-19 is long gone. It's got to be COVID-24.
Right.
But or go back to what it originally was, SARS.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, I'm glad that you shared the backstory. You clearly see through it, and living example. Your granddaughter showed up unvaccinated. I love that. My kids are 25 and 20. They've never had a vaccine, nor even have to. We've never had to resort to an antibiotics. Unlike me, your story is like mine. Although I had 24 years of medical abuse, if you will. They meant well, but
Yeah.
they certainly didn't do well to wake me up. And my pleas to God for healing didn't result in a miraculous lightning strike and healing. It led me to homeopathy and natural medicine and going organic. And then my wife, who was in chiropractic school at the time, we went organic and had to undo a lot of damage from our medical upbringing to be healthy enough to have kids. And because we didn't assault them medically, these kids are not chronically ill like we were. And so the hope for the proverbial hope for the future are kids that are not molested by doctors. And I don't mean that necessarily in a sexual sense, although that's bad enough as we talk about what goes on out there. But the
Exactly.
pharmaceutical assault, the penetration of the body through these injections is equally offensive to the body and its integrity. So we've got to do better. And that's why I ask, if you preach from a pulpit as a reverend, how do you address the health issue? I talk about the temple, the sanctity of the temple, and not abusing it, not desecrating it. And yet people don't get that message from the pharmaceutical, doctors. They continue to run to doctors in fear, thanks to the pan flute.
Yeah, exactly. The panic flu. It's just unbelievable what we've gone through over the last 5 years. And as a result of that, I think a lot of pastors' eyes are starting to open. But it's like sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. We share the gospel of Jesus Christ with as many people as we have, but you and I have absolutely no responsibility for their accepting it or not accepting it. It's our responsibility to share it, and some people will accept it and some people won't. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to people's eyes being opened to the realization of who God is and how he relates to us on a physical health aspect. And through my book, God Always Wins, I address that. And the way I address it is...
There it is. The book's up on the screen right now. New York
there
Times
you go.
bestselling author. God Always Wins, Divine Liberation from the Gods of the Woke, Robert A. Schuller. So yeah, tell me about the inspiration and what people can learn from it.
So the way I address this is, if people take their eyes, if anyone takes their eyes, and whenever we take our eyes off of God, Yahweh, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the burning bush who appeared to Moses and said, "Let my people go," we then create false gods in our minds. It is, these false gods are there to replace the true God, Yahweh. And it's almost always based in fear. And the reason I say always, because sometimes it's based on sex or drugs and running away from this, that, or the other thing. So, but it's typically and most always, all of those things are really based in fear. That's why we come back to panic, pandemonium, and pandemic. So in the case of this book, what I do is I go, when we look at history and we say, where did God really have a direct impact on freeing his people? And of course, you go to the Exodus. There he goes, and he hears his people's cry. Notice it says he hears their cry, not their prayers. They had forgotten who he was. It had been 400 years since they had experienced, and Abraham, and the memory of Abraham was 400 years old. And to remind you how long that is, our nation's going to celebrate 250 years next year. And we're talking, compare 250 and how long our nation has been here, we're talking 400 years the Israelites had been in captivity in Egypt. Having been captive that long, they had forgotten who Yahweh is. They didn't know who he was. They weren't praying. They were just crying. They were in pain. They were distraught, and God heard their prayers. And he called Moses, and he allowed the Israelites to go through extreme pain so that Moses could be particularly equipped to be able to. He spent 40 years in the house of Pharaoh, so he understood the house of Pharaoh. He wasn't a slave for those 40 years. And And that is the man that God called. It reminds me of what took place in 2020. We had to go through 4 years of suffering to allow Trump to be able to understand how to build his administration to fully for him to his eyes to open, because his eyes are open today to health and wellness that it wasn't at all 4 years ago. Imagine if he won the election in 2020 and served for the past 4 years, we would probably be looking at Kamala Harris as our president. I mean, right now, as opposed to that, we've lived through that. During that time, eyes have been opened. How many more people are aware of the corruption in government, the corruption in health and wellness, the rotating doors between the FDA and Pfizer and all of your pharmaceutical companies, the FDA? People today understand that what is taking place in big ag is going in your backyard and lighting a fire, hired by or encouraged by big pharma, who's at the front door selling fire extinguishers. And that's what's going on. We're ingesting all these poisons, we're ingesting all of this garbage, and then our bodies are getting sick, but pharma is there to care for us. And they're leading the way. People's eyes are opening up to this. They're aware of it. Podcasts like yours didn't have the audience it had 5 years ago, and it's a new day and it's a new beginning, because we have to remember God always wins. And so when we look at the divine liberation that takes place in the Old Testament as God brings his people out of Egypt, first thing he has to do is get rid of the gods that were in the minds of the Israelites, the Egyptian gods. He had to destroy those gods. And not until you destroy those gods and get them out of their minds are they ready to receive and have the real God come in and feed their minds and their souls with the truth of who they are as a person. And so at the very beginning of my book, I actually go through the process of addressing who I am in Christ, because through Christ, we are, so I have affirmative statements with Bible references to who we are in Christ, because that's what feeds our minds and conquers the negative thinking, conquers the fears, conquers all the garbage that we have put in our minds, so that we can be fulfilled with the presence of the Holy Spirit of God. So we read, I am the salt and light of the earth. I am a child of God. I've been chosen and appointed to bear fruit. I am a personal witness of Christ. I have been justified. I am free forever from condemnation. And that's about 25% of the affirmations that you can read every single day. If you have this book in your hand, you can read these affirmations. Every time you get up in the morning, you look in the mirror and you go, oh man, and you look at your day and you get frustrated and discouraged. You read these affirmations and you're empowered to be able to realize that the gods that are in your brain are evil. The gods that are in your brain are false. They're nothing but fear. And we can replace them with the love of Jesus Christ, the affirmations that we have from God, and we can be empowered and emboldened to move forward in faith.
Yeah. How do you break the programming that has you enslaved to fear, and those who would, in opportunity of your fear, take advantage of that to enslave you further? And this is the breakthrough that's occurring. And I agree. I've said it many times that the so-called curse of COVID was actually a great gift to allow us to go through, so that we could see through much of this. Many have and had been talking about it, as I have, for a lot longer, but it isn't about my timing. It's about when you're ready. When everybody comes to it at a different time, but sometimes we get together and go, wow, we're all seeing this now. Yeah, let's do something different. And I pray as well that we don't fall prey to the same patterns, because they're pretty crafty, the pans of the world, so to speak.
Yes, they are.
To deceive us through ever deepening intricacies of scientism, medical Marxism, collectivism. Again, this is what's manifested and what we must speak out against. And I think even from the pulpit, as a leader in faith, that we must be not afraid to speak out, because part of the whole 501c3 church thing is a deception on these houses that are supposed to be holy, and they're subjugated to a servant government, a secular government. I'm not saying, and I don't think you're saying, that we need a state sanctioned religion, because our founders said, that's a big problem. It's good when your faith is in power, but that doesn't always last. So we wanted to maximize the freedom to be spiritual beings, to worship as we saw fit, to live that holy life and not be encumbered by government. And yet, many of these preachers from the pulpit went in and preached the gospel of COVID and COVID shots, because they had subjugated themselves and pretended that they were, sharing God's word. And maybe there were some of those words that were good, but it was corrupted by what we saw. And I'm, again, praying that those places, those people know better now and do better now.
Some do and some don't. It's like it's the way it is. That's the way life is. Some do, some accept it, some don't. But the more they hear it, the more likely it is for their ears and their eyes and their hearts to be open to the reality. And so what I refer to in my book is a pantheon of scientism. And I open it up with a definition of what scientism is. This was written in the 1950s. It's an essay by Martin Ryder, and it appears in the Encyclopedia of Science, Technology, and Ethics. So Ryder points out the dangers of scientism when it's carried to its most ruthless logical conclusions. And here's what it says. A scientific culture privileges scientific knowledge over all other ways of knowing. It uses jargon, language, and technical evidence as a means to exclude the laity from participation in policy formation. Despite its obvious transgressions of democracy, common citizens yield to the dictates of scientism without a fight. The norms of science abound in popular culture, and the naturalized authority of scientific reasoning can lead, if left unchecked, to a malignancy of cultural norms. The most notorious example of this was seen in Nazi Germany, where a noxious combination of scientism and utopianism led to the eugenics excesses of the Third Reich. And that's from Arndt, 1951.
Yeah, it's very accurate. Very stunning that they knew that back then, and yet we didn't heed the warnings. And there are a lot of people that have come before us that have been, warning us about this. I'll mention my good friend G. Edward Griffin and what he recognized about the creeping, let's say, corruption of our own government and our ideals into a Marxist, socialist, collectivist state. And we're still having to find our way back from that as well. Now, you also have an article here, I believe, about the new head of the WEF, the World Economic Forum,
water.
who says water is not a human right. This, to me, is more subjugation through scarcity, through control of natural resources. There have been people that have been threatened with fines and imprisonment for collecting rainwater from their own roofs. What do you say about the agenda of these people? What are they really after?
It's all about control. The Communist Party is all about control. They have to have control. I have seen it throughout my life. I've had a lot of exposure to communist China. I went to China when the very first year it was opened. There wasn't a car in China. There wasn't a new building. I stayed in a hotel that was built in the 40s, and they had taken the pillows out of mothballs, and it literally smelled like mothballs. It was there. Everyone wore the Mao dress. I would walk down the street and people would follow me down the street like I was the Pied Piper. There'd be a couple hundred people around, and I remember stopping on a bridge and asking if anyone speaks English, and a couple people would raise their hands, and I would share the good news of Jesus Christ and give them a Bible, and they would walk away with just excitement. Because the first thing communism has to do is take God out of the equation. God has to come out. That's the first thing that they attack. And that's the first becomes God, book.
Yeah.
Because wokeism is communism.
Yeah. Yeah. The godless state becomes the God for people. And people worship the other G word, government, instead of God. And that's a big problem. What we see today is people ask for permission where none is required. When it comes to healing and healers, I've said this. How did they elevate one class of men over all others in the healing realm to be the poisoners for profit in our culture? And many times they were exalted in the synagogues and churches of the special parishioners, the people who are here. We want to praise our doctors for saving lives, when they turned out to be the third, second, or first leading cause of death overall. And that's not to diminish the capacity of a doctor to save lives. That's not what I'm talking about. But as a general, profession, it was exalted as a false religion, a cult. And even as I said, people of faith have fallen prey to this, the preachers, the pastors. And still, I know we're coming out of it to some degree, but it's a big part of the message that I'm appreciative of what you're sharing here, because maybe you're reaching some folks that need to be reached in this way.
Well, I'm doing the best I can. That's all you can do. You can
Yeah.
you are not required to convert anybody. You will never convert anybody. I will never convert. All we can do is share, and then God does the converting. So
Yeah.
we have to remember that, both when it comes to
Beautifully said.
evangelism and
That's
sharing the good
yeah.
news of Jesus Christ. And it's the same thing with sharing this message or any other message. We just share the truth and let the truth do what the truth does.
Amen.
And the
Exactly.
truth wins.
Amen.
Because when you boil down truth, it comes down to God is the only truth, because truth is that which doesn't change, and God is that which has never changed, the only thing that hasn't
The
changed.
immutable. Now, Reverend Robert H. Schuller, we have your website, drschuller.org. Is that right?
Yep.
And
DRSCHULLER.
yeah, we have it linked in the show notes today at
Perfect.
robertscabell.com. Are you doing a regular podcast yourself in addition to doing
Yes.
writings? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
When and how often?
8 a.m. every Sunday morning, Pacific
Okay.
time. 8 a.m. Pacific time. Every
Okay.
Sunday
So
morning.
is it like a service, a Sunday service for you when you're doing the podcast,
Yes,
or
it
how does that
is.
roll? Okay.
No, it
So
is. No music, because I don't want them to take the podcast down. So there's no worship music, and I'm not going to get up there and sing. I
there it
guess I
is.
could
Yeah.
get an AI thing to do it for me,
Yeah,
like you did, which is
we do.
awesome.
And
I
then
love that. It is
yeah.
really clever.
We're
But
having some fun with it. So, yeah,
yeah,
so Sunday Church Online, I see that. So, those of you who are digging Dr. Robert Schuller, there's another option for you to follow up and connect. He's got that book, which looks really great. And, when we talk about some of the things that we've talked about, we haven't used the word agency, but that is the freedom God gives us to choose to come back, as opposed to doing it out of fear or force or deception or fraud. And that's why I don't want the power. I'm not delusional, and I hope I never become delusional to think I have the power over others to tell them what to do, how to believe, what to believe. I try to be a living example, as I detect you are, and you have been for your kids and grandkids, as evidenced by your granddaughter that showed up, not
yeah,
vaccinated, beautiful and healthy. And that was great. That was very special.
yeah. She's super healthy. All my kids are really healthy. I'm super blessed with 9 grandkids, and anyway, that is the greatest blessing of all, to fulfill the calling that God has given us to have kids. And unfortunately, young people today have chosen not to have children, a lot of them, or to have one or two. And every time I get in a group of young people, I always say, have babies. It's the greatest blessing you can ever have. Get married and have babies. They're avoiding getting married, and they're avoiding having babies. And you need to do that. And they say, well, why do we need to do that? And I said, for the survival of the species, we need to, in order to replicate ourselves, we need 2.3 children. And that number is varied. I'm not sure what it is. It's 2 point something.
Yeah.
And so you have to, since there's going to be some people who cannot have children, you have to have 3 just
to make up for
the
that.
survival of the species.
Yes, and Robert, we are now seeing infertility rising at unprecedented rates. They were already on the rise before COVID and the COVID injection. So we have to, in our holistic mindset and application of these principles that are unchangeable and immutable, the things that govern the universe that was God created, we must return to that. And I know you're speaking out, and I'm so grateful that you're direct on this as well. And I love being able to bring the power to heal back where it belongs with each and every one of you. And that is, for me, a recognition of your divinity, because that's where all healing starts. and ends. And yes, all the things that can be utilized. Sometimes it is modern medicine, but by and large, not in a monopoly. There's freedom of thought, freedom of agency, and that's what we must bring back. And I'm inspired that you're out there doing it, and I hope people follow up with you as well.
Well, we're doing the best I can. That's all I can say. And that's why I'm on your program. And that's why we're getting the message out. I appreciate what your message is. And more of us affirming each other, and the more affirmations that people hear, that it becomes contagious. And so we need to make this a contagion that brings life back, and offers life to people.
Beautiful. Well, Robert Schuller, welcome to the Robert Scott Bell Show. Glad you're on board here. Anything we do to help you, let me know. And love to your whole family. Maybe I get your son, who's the chiropractor, on one day. That would be a
Oh,
fun story.
he'd be awesome. He's wonderful. He's
Uh,
great, and
That'll be
so
terrific.
thank you,
Well,
Scott. I appreciate it.
you got it. That's Robert Schuller. We got a homeopathic hit coming up in just a moment, but all the links are in the show notes, including to Robert's book, God Always Wins, and more. If you dig it, go check it out, go get it and share it. Good news. Good news abounds here, and I'm happy to be a conduit to get some of that good news out to y'all. So thank you, Robert.